I guess I'm live. Maybe.
Hey, Christopher, I can hear you.
Hi. All right, look at that. Yeah, I apologize. It did not like a setup on my screen, or on my system with regards to my camera. So
There we go.
yeah, I just had to battle a little bit of that. So I apologize for the delay. Let's make sure that that's still presenting. It is. Cool. So, without any further ado, then let's kick this thing off. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison. I'm a senior cloud advocate inside of DevRel, inside of Microsoft, focusing in on academic and, in particular, web dev, and that's what it is that I'm here to talk about today, which is how to take your full stack website up to the cloud. Now, if you're not familiar with the phrase full stack website, don't worry. I'm going to define that in just a moment. But first, let's talk a little bit about what it is that we have going on from Microsoft at Hack the North. So the first thing that I want to highlight is our sponsored prize, which is Hack for Good. And this is going to be awarded to the best project for social good, which features Microsoft technologies. And you're going to notice that we're being rather vague there because it's very much up to you to decide as a team what's going to work best. So you could build something maybe using Power Apps, or maybe using something inside of Azure, or whatever it is that it happens to be. That's basically the two qualifiers. And if you hit the little link that Hack with Azure, you can see our scoring rubric and what it is that we're going to really be looking for there. Now, the prize is going to be a 12-month Xbox Gold subscription for each team member, a 12-month LinkedIn Premium subscription as well, $250 in free Azure credits, so that way you can keep building whatever it is that you've got. Maybe you're going to take a look at the Imagine Cup, which you can go find out more information on. Again, check that aka.ms/hackwithazure for more info. And then last but not least is we're going to donate $500 to a charity of the team's choosing. We've got a cool little list of some fantastic charities that you can pick from, and we will donate that on the team's behalf. Now, if you're looking for cool resources, the two that I want to call out, number one is Azure for Students. So aka.ms/A4S. This will give you $100 in free Azure credit that that you can use over 12 months, as well as access to a whole bunch of cool little free services and resources and so forth. You can create an account on there with your .edu, your school address, or if you're not able to get in using that, you can reach out to one of us Find Microsoft folks, and we can give you a code that will allow you access. But you should be able to self-serve by using your .edu address. The other one that I want to highlight is aka.ms/hackwithazure. And that will give you access to a whole bunch of just like really cool resources and documentation and so forth on some of the different things that you can do with Azure. But let's get into the real star of today's show, and that's going to be Azure Static Web Apps, which is the service we're going to use to deploy our full stack web app out to the cloud. So what is Azure Static Web Apps? Well, in marketing ease, it will allow you to go from code to global scale in minutes. Yay! Okay, we didn't come here for marketing though. So let's sort of move past that then, and let's talk about what it is that Azure Static Web Apps can do for us. When we think about how websites are developed in the modern day and age, we're typically talking about what's known as a full stack web app, which basically means that we're going to have some logic and some code and so forth running on our server, but we're also going to have a rather large percentage of that code also running inside of the client. And this gives us the ability to take advantage of the processing power on the client and just automatically gives us scale because, after all, any code, any processing that runs on the client, that's completely free to the server. And that gives you infinite scale. And so we have all of these different frameworks like Angular and React and Svelte and Vue that you can use to then create this style of application. But once we've created this, how do we then deploy this out? How do we then deploy this out to the cloud? And this is, again, now where Azure Static Web Apps is going to come into play. So it's going to give you that ability to build and host these full stack, or sometimes known as static web apps, up to the cloud. Now, don't let the name static there fool you, because what you're going to notice, I'm actually going to go slightly out of order here, is you will get server-side code as well. So these absolutely 100% are dynamic. And that server-side code is going to use Azure Functions, which is our serverless implementation, which was going to give you just automatic scaling. And I don't have to think about servers or anything like that. I can just push out my code, and then Azure Static Web Apps will take care of the rest for me, which is pretty cool. Speaking of things that it's going to take care of for me is authentication and authorization. Managing auth is one of the biggest pain points for web developers. This requires a lot of code. There's all sorts of different frameworks that are out there. And quite frankly, none of them really do, I think anyway, a really spectacular job, with maybe a couple of exceptions. That they're oftentimes rather clunky and require you knowing things about OAuth and so forth. This is actually baked right in. That authentication, authorization, you've got for Twitter, for GitHub, and for Azure Active Directory, literally without having to reconfigure anything at all. And then last but not least, and this is probably the best part, is the fact that your deployment, your CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous deployment, cool buzzwords there, is all going to be powered by GitHub Actions. So if your code is inside of a GitHub repository, which chances are it is, you're going to see with Azure Static Web Apps, you'll be able to deploy just by pushing up your code. So here's going to be our life cycle here. What we're going to have is our app and whatever server-side code it is inside of our repository. We're going to push this up into our main branch in our repository. And then that action is going to kick off, and a little process is going to run that will then deploy out all of our static content and all of our server-side code, all of that dynamic stuff, up to the cloud, up to Azure Static Web Apps. And that's really it. But enough of the slides. Let's actually get in and do it. Because if you're anything like me, and I know I am, you really just want to see the code. And so that's what we're going to get into here. So let me do this. I want, and sound effects help. There we go. Cool. Here's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to walk through this little starter kit that you can actually use for your own projects that already has a little bit of sample code and setup ready for you to go. And if you wanted to go in and add on whatever framework it is that you might want, maybe with React or Vue.js, or my personal favorite these days, which is Svelte, you could go ahead and do that. And you'll also notice that there's full setup steps and everything else that you might need to get up and running with this. Now, what I've already done is I've already hit this little use template right up top, and that's going to then give you the ability to create a brand new repository based on that. So you could go ahead and give it a name, and away you go. So I've already done that one step. And then the next step that I took is I opened that up inside of Visual Studio code spaces. Or actually, sorry, strike that. GitHub code spaces. Old habits die hard here. So this is effectively inside of your browser, Visual Studio Code, just right there, which is pretty darn slick if you ask me. Now you are going to notice, and I'll open up a bit of code here. There we go, right here. But what you are going to notice is that I've got my little Explorer and everything else over here on the right side. I personally prefer that over here. And the reason for that, you're going to get a little VS Code tip, is because now when I bring that window in, I just like pop that in and out here, my code doesn't move, just stays right there. And I know that this seems pretty small, but it actually does make kind of a big difference because now I don't have to readjust my eyes. So I always put that off to the right. And let's see if I can't find that setting here real quick. What is that called? I think that's called my workbench. Workbench. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so workbench editor, open side-by-side direction, and you'll notice that I've got that set to the right. Nope, that's the wrong one. Why can I not find it? I was not planning on actually doing this demo, and let's see. Nope, I want... I'm going to give this about 2 more seconds here. There it is, workbench sidebar. That's the option that I was looking for. Yeah, so over here on the left, now what I want you to notice, let me open up my code file, is every time that I toggle this, that now goes away, or that moves to the side. And I don't like that. I want that to stay in one place. So if I go back over here to my settings, let's put that back over to the right where it belongs. And now what you're going to notice, that's again my workbench sidebar location. You can go search for that in your settings. And now, as I toggle this, all of this stays in place. Pretty cool. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and... I see Justin out there saying, never thought of that. Yeah, I know. It's a little thing, but it makes a difference. It makes a difference. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a real quick exploration of the code here. So what you're going to notice is I've got a couple of main folders here. So the first one that I've got is public, and this is where all of my client-side code resides. I've got my little index HTML, and this is going to have a very basic setup here where I've got a text box to allow you to type in the title for a task. And then I've got a button right here that will allow you to add that in. And then what I've got is an unordered list where we're going to display all of those tasks. And if I go into the client-side JavaScript, I've got all of the JavaScript here to then handle that. Now, you are going to notice that this is very heavily commented, and chances are you've probably been told that you should always comment your code. That's a best practice, and that's a true statement. Commenting it to this level, though, is probably a little excessive. The reason that I have it to this level is because I want to make sure that anybody who goes back to this knows exactly what it is that's going on. So I'll let you go back later and kind of read through all the comments and see exactly what it is that's happening. But the couple of things that I want to highlight here is that I've got a load tasks function, and this is going to be responsible for calling out to the server here. You're going to notice /API/tasks. And then you're going to notice down below that I've got a little display tasks that will then be responsible for updating my page display. And then this will add in each individual task right there. And then last but not least, down below is I've got an update task, because what you're going to notice is that I'll be able to toggle all of those tasks as well. So that's my client-side code, kind of, relatively core JavaScript there. The next thing that I've got is my server-side code. Now, this is set up using Azure Functions. And what you're going to notice with Azure Functions is that each function is going to have a folder. So you'll notice my tasks folder right there. And inside of there, we're going to have a JavaScript file that's going to be called index.js. And this is now where all of your server-side code will reside. Now, the first thing that I want to highlight is I'm using Mongoose. And if you're not familiar with Mongoose, this is a wonderful library that will help you work with a MongoDB database. And the main reason that I'm using Mongoose here, partly is because I like it, but also really to highlight the fact that you can install whatever server-side package it is that you might want onto this website. So I'm using Mongoose, but if there's any other frameworks or packages that you like, then you can go ahead and do that. And Adrian asked the question about workshops being recorded. As far as I know, everything is being recorded. I know that this one is. Okay, so the first part of this is all of my Mongoose setup. So I'm just connecting out here. And you're going to notice that I'm going to create a schema. I'm going to set up a model. Now, if you're not familiar with Mongoose, or maybe you want to use a different library, you can absolutely do that. I'm just using Mongoose here. And then what you're going to notice is here is my export. This is where I'm going to actually create the function of Azure Functions. I'm going to have one core object here that's going to be my context object. This will give me access to the request and be able to send information back on down to all of my clients. So you'll notice that I've got get tasks here, which will load everything, create a brand new one, and update any existing. There they all are. Now what I want to do is I want to deploy this out to Azure. So I'm going to use a neat little extension here inside of VS Code called Azure Static Web Apps. I've already got it installed. You could install that here if it wasn't already installed. And then I'm going to click on Azure here. And then now it's going to prompt me to start logging in. So let me sign into Azure. Give this just a moment. Cool. I can now close the window. Thank you. Okay. And now let me hit the little plus to create a brand new static website. So I'm going to choose my little MSDN subscription. And now the next thing that it needs is access to GitHub. So let me allow it to do that. And that kind of makes sense because, again, all of this is going to be built around GitHub. Cool. So now that I've done that, it's going to go, all right, well, give me a name for your static web app. I'm going to say Hack the North. Then it's going to ask me, where do you want this to be? And so I'm going to choose West US because that's closest to me. But I do want to highlight that this will actually be geo-distributed automatically for you. Literally nothing that you have to do to get that to happen, which is pretty slick. I can choose one of the pre-built ones here for how to configure everything. But in my case, I'm going to go with custom here because I want to be able to highlight the couple of core options. So the first is, where does our client-side code reside? And in my case, that's inside that public folder. So let me choose that, hit enter. And then the next is if I've got any location for my build output. So if I'm running a process to generate my client-side code, and that's going to emit a new folder, which typically it would, I could put in that name right there. Since this is vanilla.js, don't need anything like that. And I'm just going to clear that out, hit enter, and let that start to deploy out. Now, Amal asks a great question, which is, if it is distributed, then why do we need to provide a region? And the reason for that is because one very cool thing that Azure Static Web Apps will give to you is this. Let me portal. And let's go to all resources here. This should be here. Might just take it a minute for it to show up. Where is my Hack the North? Just give it a second. Come on. There we go. There's my Hack the North demo. Just took it a second. Okay, cool. So what you're going to notice here is this is inside of Azure. So this has been deployed out. It's now there inside of Azure. I could also have gotten to it from inside of Visual Studio Code, but I wanted to come here to highlight this. And you're going to notice that I've got environments. One very cool thing is that if you PR into that main branch, this will actually create a brand new staging environment. The staging environments are not going to be geo-distributed, but your production one will. So what you're actually choosing there is where you want your staging to go. Now, the other big thing, while I'm here, let's highlight a couple of other real quick features. First, you're going to notice that we've got custom domains. Now, why do we have custom domains? Well, partly because you probably want a custom domain, but also because you're going to notice that the website name here that it generated is, in my case, Ambitious Beach, and then a hex value, which, by the way, I think that that's just like a great mantra for life, just Ambitious Beach. But in any event, you're going to notice that it generated a random URL here. And that's by design because, you start to run out of names after a little while. So instead, it just generates a random name. If you want something good, then you could go ahead into custom domains and add in your own custom domain here. So if you're maybe trying to go with another competition that might or might not be going on about having a really cool custom domain name through some registrar, you could use that option right there. Pretty slick. Okay. Now let me go back over here to my environment, and you're going to notice that this now shows as ready. So this is all deployed out. So if I hit browse, there is my website. Now, in a minute here, this is actually going to give me an error message because it's going to go, hey, wait, we need a database that, if you remember back over here to our code, we had code that was going to call out to a database. Where's our database? It's a good question. We didn't create it yet. Let's create the database. So let me just hit create right here. And I'm going to do a search for Cosmos DB, Azure Cosmos DB. And I'm going to click create. And Cosmos DB is a document database on Azure. And what you're going to notice is that there's a Mongo API available to you. So that's the one that I'm going to choose. And I'm going to put it into that resource group that it created for me, that Hack the North, a resource group just being a group of resources. I'm going to give this a name of Hack the North Demo because, again, I'm very creative in my naming. This will not be automatically geo-replicated, so I am going to put this into West US 2. I'm going to mark this right here for serverless. And then I'm going to hit review and create here. Now, Amar asked the question, Cosmos DB is a fully managed DB service? And the answer to that is yes. And in fact, this is right here where I'm getting in with that serverless. So now I'm actually only going to pay for whatever it is that I'm using, which is going to be pennies for most any hackathon project, because you're just not going to be generating a whole bunch of data calls there. And honestly, this is what I always use. Now, if I haven't already mentioned it, you can, of course, https://aka.ms/A4S, which I'll put into the chat right there, to access Azure for Students. Now, this will take just a moment to create here, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to vamp just long enough for this to create without boring everybody. This will sometimes take a few minutes. Usually it's only about a minute or two, or if I'm doing a demo, it's usually just long enough to make me nervous, and then it will finally finish creating. So hopefully this will take place pretty quickly here. While that's going in the background, let's just sort of leave that there. Let me do this. I'm going to go to GitHub, and let me, my repositories here. And let's go to Hack the North. Okay, so this is my actual repository. And what I want to highlight in here is here's my little GitHub action. This is what was created. So you can actually see the deployment behind the scenes. And you could also go in and take a look at the workflow file that it built here. So you can see how the whole thing works if you so desire. Okay. Let's come back over here, and that is still creating. Are there any questions up to this point here? Told you, this is going to be just long enough to make me nervous. Come on. Come on. So there's two cows standing out in a field. One turns to the other and says, "Hey, you ever worry about that mad cow disease?" And the second one looks back and says, "Well, no, I'm a penguin." See, it already had mad cow disease. It thought it was a penguin. Yeah. Okay, good. All right, I've got questions here. All right, so the first question from Elaine here is, sorry, where do we put our React code again? Which file folder? You could actually really kind of put that wherever it is that you might want, and you could even just create a full project from scratch if you so desire. So you could put that into public, or you could put that into like an SRC folder, and then have your build script then just create a brand new folder that you would highlight. Amal asked the question, do you have to use your school-provided email address for Azure for Students? The answer to that is yes, preferably, because that will then allow you to self-service create the account. Franklin asked the question, could you show us how to deploy your app without using the VS Code extension? Sure. So if you wanted to do it without the VS Code extension, and by the way, I want to highlight, I strongly recommend using the VS Code extension. You could just do it through the portal. So if I go into create a resource and I do a search for static web apps and hit create and create, this is basically that exact same screen that I saw previously. So just it's the exact same setup, just configure everything here, and then eventually just review and create, and away it will go from there. So either way works. I really do recommend using the extension though. Okay, this has now created my little resource. So let me hit go to resource, and it's going to give me all of my little connection strings. Let me go to Node.js, and I'm going to hit copy here. Now, if I go back over here to my code, what you're going to notice is that I've got an environmental variable called connection string, and that's what I want to set up for my project. That's what I want to set up for my application. So let me do that. Let me go back home. Let me go back to my Hack the North static web app. Let me go into configuration, and then I can say, add connection string, and then that connection string value. And now let me hit OK. Let me hit save. And now if I go back to that little tasks website and let's hit refresh, and let's deliver session for Hack the North and click add task, voila, there's our little app our little task created. And I click on that, and that will then be cleared out. And if I do a real quick refresh on the page, what you're going to notice is that that does stay there because it's pulling from the server. So there it is. So what we saw there is how we can deploy out our website to Azure Static Web Apps, how we can configure it, how we could set up a custom domain, how we can add on a database, and then update the configuration to do that as well. Now, last little thing, let me go back over here to the Student Starter Kit, and let me put that into the chat window here, is that this does contain everything that you would need to get up and running with it. So you could go back and follow through all of this if you weren't following along at home or at school or wherever you happen to be at the moment. And, whoops. If you're looking for a host of other resources, you can go check out Hack with Azure. In fact, let me just bring up that little slide right there. So with that, that's Azure Static Web Apps. That's how you can deploy your full stack website to the cloud. Any last questions? You're very welcome. Well, thank you to everybody for joining. Hopefully you enjoyed all of this, and good luck with the hackathon. I very much look forward to seeing everything that you build this weekend. So, and as Ryan highlights, please feel free to stop by the sponsor booth on Discord. We're also happy to answer any questions that you might have there as well. So, thank you. Bye.